All right. So the idea, all right, with auth is this is normally like a two-part lecture. The first part, and we're just going to combine them, and I will give you guys a short break in between. The first part is when we say auth, it's actually this like combo of two things, and that is authentication and authorization. So authentication is, are you who you say you are? Can I authenticate you? And the way that we do it over the internet is with this like username and this sort of like secret code word that you and I have previously agreed on that says, even though I can't see your face, I can't hear your voice, and I can't read your thumbprint, which, I mean, we can do that in today's world. The idea is that when I first make my account, I can tell you, hey, let's make a secret word together. It's called pineapple. Weird. It's called pineapple. And so anytime I put in the username, like your boy, and then I put in pineapple, you know it's me, right? It's something kind of obscure. It's something that has like no relationship to anything. And that way I can kind of tell you like, hey, I am who I say I am. Does that make sense? And so you could think of this, and like a good example is like, how many of you have like been to the airport, like flown before? Yeah? And so there's two steps with that, all right? The first thing is this authentication. And that is when you first go in, you're gonna be like, cool, I've got this flight to Miami. Yo, I'm out. You go up and they're gonna say, hey, let me see your ID. Somebody else verified you at like the federal level of either like the country of your origin for a passport, or you have a driver's license. And to get that driver's license, you have to prove like birth certificate, social security number, like all this other stuff that says you are who you say you are, so that the form of ID that you use is sort of legitimate. And so if I go in and I'm like, cool, my name's Evans, I'm flying to Miami, here's my driver's license. And so the person at the agent could then in turn go, great, your name is Evans, I see your driver's license says Evans, cool, let me look in the system for somebody named Evans going to Miami. And then they will authenticate you, all right? Like, cool, you are who you say you are. In which case the next step is now, after I've authenticated you, I have to figure out what are you authorized to do. Just because I have this ticket, right, and I go through security, can I get on any bird that I want to go on? Can I get on any flight? No, can I just like go and be like, oh cool, I know my ticket says Miami, but let me just, actually I'm just gonna go to China, no big deal. No, I'm not authorized to get on any other flight except for my flight to Miami. And so there's a difference between authentication and authorization. So this first half is all about this authentication and how we're supposed to do that. And so the idea here is over the internet, as we kind of talked about, this like secret code word, this password that we've all grown used to, should we be saving this password into our database directly? Like if my username is your boy and my password is pineapple, should I be putting username your boy and then password pineapple right into my database? Who thinks that's a good idea? We should do this. Who thinks it's a bad idea? Who's just really full from lunch and raising their hands is an absolute pain? I thought you had a terrible lunch. You're sending me mixed signals.
I have.
Okay, so great. So now the idea here is that we need to be able to like somehow figure out a way to take this plain text password, this regular old string, and turn it into something that even if one of these like bad people on the internet, one of these hacksaws were to steal or scrape my database, that there's no identifiable information that correlates and gives them access. So luckily for us, there is a gem called bcrypt, and I will introduce that to you. So normally, let's do this. Let's get into the Rails console. Powerful, great. So you can always check to see if a constant exists by bcrypting it. Cool, right? It just returns bcrypt versus like something that maybe doesn't exist, like your boy. It'll be like, hey, like there's no constant your boy, so that proves that that doesn't exist. However, bcrypt exists in my app. If you ever start a brand new Rails app, what you will find inside your gem file is a where did I put it? I'm looking for bcrypt. Oh, there it is. Yeah, sorry. It's normally commented out. Here I simply just uncommented it and then ran bundle install. Cool? And so now it exists within my app. And let's take a look at like what we're trying to do here. What I want to do is run bcrypt namespace password. Have you seen this namespace before? All right, what does that really mean? Right, there's like a module, and inside that module, there's a class called bcrypt. And inside that class, there are a bunch of functions. There are a bunch of methods in there. And so what I want to do is like create. Let's say my password was pineapple. Pineapple. Pineapple pen. You guys remember that? All right, I drop a lot of unnecessary pop culture references. Feel free to tell me I'm old or not cool. And this is what I get back. Right? This weird sort of unreadable string. And so here's the problem. The problem is when I create this weird string and I save it into my database, I now need some sort of way where if a user logs back in, right, I need you to like take this like metaphorical journey with me. And so a user's at this login page, right? You can imagine that there's a form, and all it says is username and password. So when they type in their username, they type in their password, and they hit submit, params come across on the other side. And you have a param at a key of, okay, yeah, username and a key of password, right? So params at a key of username, params at a key of password. What I need to do is I need to like look up the user. So I'm probably going to do some sort of user.findBy username, params username. And then inside there, I need to check to see, hey, once I find that user, I'm going to check to see, hey, that user.password, does it equal to pineapple? But the problem is I've stored this string in there. And so I need a way to compare like what the user put in, the params password, which is a plain text, to this weird hashified string that I've saved into my database. And so there's no. So that's a good question. So the idea here is that I need to probably save, like, just for example, and do this. Bloop. Cool. Every single time I run bcrypt password, all right, even if I put in the same thing, it'll give me something weird. Cool. And this creates a higher level of security because think about it, right? There's a possibility that you've used the same password for different accounts, which, I mean, nobody does that, right? Everyone creates unique passwords for every single account you've ever made. And they're so unique that nobody else has ever used a similar password on any other account, right? Okay, all right. So this class doesn't enjoy sarcasm, very good. I'll be more direct. Testing the waters, right? I'm figuring you guys out. So the idea here is I need to be able to take, all right, let's do this. If you ever want to see like everything you've ever typed in, you can type history and it'll give you, oh, sorry. No, that doesn't work. If you type history in just in your console, it'll tell you like all the commands you ran. But either way, so I've passed, right? Cool. So I just stored password as this, and this string comes out the exact same way. So what I want to do is I want to somehow check is password triple equal to this double equal to the string pineapple. What do you think I'll get? True. Interesting. You guys tracking this so far? What about pineapple? Password.
False. I don't know. I'm going to say false too.
Cool. Does anyone know why this is happening? Oh, did you? Cool. Does anyone know why it's happening? Yep. Yep. That's a fair assumption and also true. Let's take a look and figure out what's going on. So back all the way in mod 1, do you remember something called monkey patching?
Yeah.
Right? What is monkey patching?
Let's say that the classes that's originally in, you can go change it like
add behaviors to classes that they don't normally
just change it.
Correct, right? So I can go right into like class array if I wanted to, and then I can overwrite things that are normally there. Like what's a popular array method? Like length or something? Yeah, cool. Def length, and that is simply just going to return word and length and array. I'm going to change length. So if I were to take any array and say, hey, what's the length of this? Yeah, word is bound. Cool. That's monkey patching. I can overwrite any one of these. So I can open up a class, jump right into it, jump into a method, override it and save it if I wanted to. So here's how that applies here. Let's take a look at bcrypt. So boop. So this is the bcrypt source docs. So if you look up bcrypt, specifically the Ruby wrapper for it, you can check right into password. So look at this. Module bcrypt, so powerful. Class password. Inherits from what? String. So it's pulling in all the string methods. One of those string methods, right? If you want to see what this is like really cool. This just means that I'm pushing self into class. So anything after that will actually be a class method. So you don't have to put self dot in front of it if you're building a bunch of class methods. I know. Thank you. The one person that was impressed. Thank you. Cool. So you can initialize and check out this. Simply defining the double equals inside password after it had inherited from string. So it means that it's overriding the double equals operator. And it's doing its own version of the double equals. What that means is, right, if I were to take, say, this right here, this string, and I would copy and paste it. Cool. If I were to ask the class, what class is this? That's just a string. I straight copied and pasted it, right? It sees the quotations. However, password is the same thing. But remember how I made password? I use this create on password. If I had a dog class and I did dog.create, what type of object would I get back? A dog object, right? So if I did bcrypt password create, what type of object should I get back? So when I run pass double equal, what I'm really saying is I'm going to run the double equal operator. If you really want to get down the rabbit hole, I am sending a message with the double equal method. That's getting too crazy. I'm calling the bcrypt double equals, and I'm asking it, hey, are you equal to pineapple? Correct. Versus when I do pineapple the string, I'm actually calling the double equal from the string class and comparing it against the bcrypt object. And that's why that works. Oh wow, finally, some aha moments. Thank God, this class was tough to impress. All right, cool. Any questions on kind of like why that's happening and why that might be important?
Wait, triple equal, what?
I don't know what the triple equal is in Ruby.
Oh, right, because it's not built in. Yeah.
No, there's a type to do. But you can use this
No, but it's
underscore
not built
password.
into the bcrypt. Yeah, bcrypt doesn't have that function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. We good?
Yeah.
Question?
Just curious about what's actually like happening under the hood. It's like converting it back into a string to compare.
Yes. Right. So remember super. What does super do? Calls like a parent sort of method. And so inside the bcrypt engine, which is not something that we're privy to, there is like a method called hash secret. It takes in the secret, which is the password that I typed in, like pineapple, for example, and it uses this instance variable at salt. If we look all the way up, we can even see there's a reader for this instance variable dot salt. So looking into that, if there is a reader, then I can in fact look at the salt. So if I look at pass and I look at the salt,
What is the salt?
And there we go. So what the salt is it's a random piece of data, which is why every time I run bcrypt password create, it's completely different. It's a random piece of data that gets inserted. So based on your version of your OS, on the type of computer that you're using, it will pull different information.
But wouldn't the other part be the same though?
I'm sorry.
If you don't have the salt, if you like take out the salt, would the other part be the same? If you create two pineapples.
No, the salt is always the same. That's what the salt is for here.
Is this all always the
Salt's always different.
The salt is always different.
Yeah,
Salt's
always
different.
It has to be different.
Does the rest of the string like depend how it's like deciphered is dependent on like the salt?
Can you-
Yes, the salt contains information.
Just look at two.
It's like the first 6 characters.
It's pulling in, right? So the salt will be basically like this kind of like part of the string, but it'll be different every single time because it's a different piece of data. So for example, I don't know if this is true, but this is one of the examples. Based on a particular version, if you're on like OS X or something, it will go and pull like the date time. If you're on like a Windows machine, it might pull like a different piece of data. Either way, the point is that it's a random piece of data, right? If you know the exact time on the exact machine, on the exact version that someone ran this bcrypt create, you might have a chance to actually like crack it. But the idea here is that it is a one-way hashing algorithm. And the reason it's one way is because I never ever want to be able to take pineapple. I want to be able to create this from pineapple, but I never want to be able to take this and recreate pineapple. Because if I'm a hacker and I pull the database and I have all of these strings here, if I know the algorithm, I can just run it through backwards and get the actual plain text password. So it needs to be one way. So for all intents and purposes, I see your question, this is somewhat secure. Nothing on the internet is truly secure. It's just, it would take so painfully long that nobody should really attempt it, right? In order to recreate this hash and to do the checksum, it takes a lot of processing power. And so in order to check it, what you'll wind up doing is you'll take a list, right, of hundreds and millions of common passwords. And then you'll run this pass double equal to password, 1, 2, 3, 4, Michael, whatever like all the common passwords are, and you keep checking until it returns true. That is what is known as a rainbow table. And that is like a rainbow table attack. And that is like, I scraped your database, I've got it somehow, and I basically run on the username, I check the password, and I compare it against every single possible word in the entire human knowledge base, all right? And that's what the difference is. If I were to put pineapple, and then how long do you think it would take before the computer attempts this? Before it attempts like just pineapple A, pineapple B, pineapple C, pineapple D. Right? It takes a really long time. So that's why they tell you, that's why you get to all these passwords like, you need to have at least 2 numbers, right? You need some special characters in there. It needs to have like your great-grandfather's social security number, and it's like insane. And you're kind of like, okay, I'm not gonna remember this, it's 12 characters long, whatever. Then you write it on a piece of paper, and then you put it on a Post-it note right next to your computer. You laugh as a cybersecurity person. That is the most common form of security fraud, or like theft. Because guess what you do? You're like, you know what? I'm gonna take a remote day. And you log in your computer at Starbucks, and then homeboy or homegirl's like, you know? Or you're like, excuse me, is there a Wangtron? I'm like, oh, my latte's done. And I get up and I go pick it up, and they'll just take a picture of it. That's like the most common form of like cybersecurity. Yeah, it's really weird. Paper and pen, beat us again. Question.
So the salt is a different piece of data that's also hashed, and then that's put together with the original word given to the program that's hashed, and that makes the entire string.
Correct. Yeah.
Are the word that you put in and the salt data put together and then hashed as a string, like all together, or is it like salt, like hash the salt, hash the string, and then
At that level of detail, I don't actually know. That'd be cool blog post if anyone wants to like dive into bcrypt. But the idea here is that bcrypt is like generally pretty good industry practice in terms of hashing, and so this is like a secure way of doing it.
So people like industries or like big companies use bcrypt, or they do their own thing?
A combination.
Okay.
All right, so
So what we're seeing is always like a hashed version of the salt. We're never actually seeing what
correct.
that is. Right.
So great. So here's a good example of like what this like one-way hashing algorithm is, right? Are there any like vegans or like vegetarians in the room? You're a vegan, vegetarian? All right, so imagine this like vegetable grinder, right? And you have like broccoli, and you got some celery, and then you put it into this vegetable grinder. You're crunching it up, no big deal, and then you get this like green mush at the end. When you look at it, right, can you identify readily what that is? Can you look at this green mush that came out of this grinder and go, oh my God, that's broccoli for sure, 100%, Hundo P? Probably not, right? But through the modern science, you could probably test that green mush to see like, hey, are there traces of broccoli in here? There's traces of celery, and you can identify that in fact, like, hey, that is in there, right? Yes? All right. So it's a one-way hashing algorithm. Like if I take this green mush and I put it back into the vegetable grinder, am I gonna get this whole stalk of celery? Like no, right? And so this basically what's happening here. Cool, any questions on like this bcrypt hashing algorithm, why we need it, and then what it's doing, and how we can utilize it? Awesome, good deal. All right, so let's actually do something with it. So let's take a look at my code. I've got this app, right? I have a user's controller, all right, and I have a user's new, and I'm just gonna create this brand new user. Let's take a look at what that new file is. Bloop. And here, I just have a form for @user, no big deal, and I have a username and I have a password. So let's take a look at the schema to make sure that on my user, I have username and I have password. I take a look at the schema. Boop. I see something like username, but I see something called password digest. So I don't actually have the password attribute on my user class. So far, so good. Yeah? Okay. All right. Trust me when I tell you, like, everyone's style is a little bit different. Mine's just really different, and you'll get used to it. So how does Form 4 work in regards to what these symbols are? How is it going to build these text fields? It's going to reference the model, right? So it's going to do @user.username, and it's going to do @user.password to put inside this text field. Cool? But we know that we don't have this password attribute. We have something called password digest. So if I were to go to my Rails app, you got a question? Okay. So boom, yay, I'm on Rails. Oh, just kidding. Embarrassing. Let me exit out of here. Start the server. Boop, boop, boop. Yay, I'm on Rails. I can just go to users new. And what should I see? Mega bless. Huh? Look at this error that says, hey, there's undefined method password for user. Why would this be happening? Because I don't have the attribute password for user. I have something called password digest. And magical Rails, did you mean password digest? Rails will just write itself. It's insane. So what's happening is I don't have password. So what I can do is I can kind of hack around it. And that is I can build I can build these getters and setters, right? Remember, it's just trying to call @user.password. So for my user model, if I were to do something like this, the method password will exist. What it will return is nothing, because there's no such thing as like @password for the user. So it returns like this. It doesn't know what it is. It'd just be like, cool, the method exists, but nothing's there. Cool? Come on, Rails. Let's go. Let's go, dog. All right. And there we go. And that's how I basically got around that error. And I'll explain why that's important. Cool? Any questions on like what that error was, where it came from, and how I hacked around it? Just by a show of hands then, just a quick thumbs up like, yo, I got you, fam. Awesome.
I guess my question is, why password digest? Yeah, like why? Like I get that like somehow the tables interact with only, or like some programs only interact with the word password digest. And you have to use that in your table. But I'm not getting why you can't just do that in your form.
I'm gonna explain right now why I'm not using password digest in my form, why I'm using password specifically, and why I hacked it by creating a custom getter method for password. Okay, it's a very good question. So if I don't answer it, please ask again. Hold me accountable. So the idea here is that I have like a username, and I have like, you know, your boy, and then password could be like pineapple. If you wanted to, instead of like this dirty text field, if you put like password, it'll actually change them to the dots, so you can use that instead. Yeah, I figured some of you wanted to see that. So instead of text field, I would put password. But for the sake of this lecture, I want you to see the passwords that I'm using, so I'm going to just use text field. Cool? Y'all all right? Cool. So anyways, the idea here is that when I send across these params, what route should I be hitting for this like sign up? I should be hitting like some sort of like create action, right? Because I'm trying to sign up. I'm trying to make a new user, make a new account. So I should probably be posting to where? Right? Remember, form 4 will go to users, hit a post, which will ultimately hit RESTful routing, this users create action. So let's dive into this users create. Boop, boop, boop. In my users controller, I have this users create. I can take the user params, which we know is the username and password. Once I sign up, I immediately want to start this session. That's how I can keep track of who this person is. The reason I want to start a session here is because how many of you have used a website where you signed up, you're like, cool, you should like make this like Spotify account, whatever, right? And then right after you sign up, the first thing it asks you to do is log in. That's a 1-star user experience, right? No bueno. If I sign up, I would want to be already logged in. And so in my create, I'm actually going to create the session. And that's how I do it. If I don't have this, then essentially I've just made a user in the database, but I haven't actually started the session. I can't keep track of this user yet. So far, so good? And so that's just one like little like minor optimization. And then I redirect and I go to this user. Here's what happens when I try to do these user params. Cool. Let's do it. Boop. Fresh. And I try making, who wants to sign up for this powerful application? Cool. You have a cool username you want to go by? Thunder God. Tim? It's all right. I don't have a lot of users, so likely you'll get it, you know? I'm just going to make up a password for you because I've done this before, and I think the person slipped and told me their real password. So your password is password. Cool? I know that's something you definitely don't do, and if you do, very subtly change it. Cool? All right. If I hit this create user, okay, I run into this error. I should have put the buy bug earlier. Embarrassing. Let's try this. All right, did you guys see the error? It said unknown attribute password. Cool. Tim, one more time. Password 1, V secure. That's just the password. Right. And so I hit this buy bug, right? What happens when I try to actually create with these user params?
It doesn't recognize the password.
That's right. Unknown attribute password for user. What it's trying to do is take the user params and write into the database at the attribute of password. Here is where we will intercept that writing to the attribute password and write it instead to password digest, because here's what happens, right? I'm in user params, and I'm going to try to write it. What I want to do is I'm going to catch it right here by writing my own custom writer. Password equal, right, is the writer for like the password getter. And it's going to receive a plain text password. So right now, it's just the string password for the user, Tim. What I want to do is I really just want to do this. I want to create a brand new bcrypt password, taking in the string password that came in from the user params. And then I want to overwrite the attribute password digest in my database with this hashified string. That way, in my database, I'm not saving the plain text password. I'm instead saving that like unreadable string. And so I need to keep password so I can write a custom reader and writer so I can intercept it. And then when I actually save it to the database, I save it to an attribute that does exist after I've run it through the bcrypt engine. So the password has been digested. It's been hashified, it's gone through the vegetable grinder, and is safe to save in the database. Are there any questions as to why we use password at first and what this password digest attribute is doing? Okay. Yes.
Wait, yeah, I have a question. What do you call this? What do you call the setter method?
When do you call the setter method? Very good. When I try to do users.create, it will go through each of the individual params, right? So there's params at a key of username. Oops. It'll try to do something like this, right? So far, so good. Password at a key of params password, right? This is what it's trying to do. What it's saying is user create in the attribute username. I'm doing what is essentially user dot username equals to params at a key of username. This right here is the setter.
Wait, is that supposed to be, it's a class method?
I'm sorry. It's whatever this is, like at user dot username, right? And then naturally, the next part is going to be add password dot add a params of password. And then this thing is going to happen. I don't know what password, I can't set password. Except I can go in and create my own setter. And then I use self to refer to that particular instance I'm about to make. Look at the empty password digest field and put in this hashified string. Cool? That's a good question.
In your user params, you have,
Sorry, that was disgusting.
in your user params, you have password digest, is that right?
In my user params, I have password.
Oh, no, you have just password, okay.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I know where your head's at. Awesome. So if there's no questions as to like why I wrote this setter, let's move forward. Okay, so now that I have this setter, what we should see is this hashified string take the place of this like password digest attribute. So let's continue. It should break. Cool. Let's go back. Did I save it? Embarrassing. Cool. Tim, password. Cool. It should save, right? But look at the username and look at the password digest. It is now this hashified string. I like just hard coded it because
Can't you just put user first?
I can. I wrote that to show you. I can't do that. Cool? Right? So, look at this. Oh my God. Hey! It's because I took you to Flavortown earlier. Okay, you guys don't like Guy Fieri. It's all right. It's just a running joke. Powerful. All right, so he's the king of trash can nachos, right? So then I redirect to add user, so I'm at that user show page. Any questions so far about intercepting, saving to the database as hashified string? All right, so now the next part is, right, what I need to do is recreate this like login functionality. And the idea here is that I need to be able to authenticate this user. So we talked about the signing up and creating, and now we need to talk about like logging in. So the login and the sign up page should be pretty similar, right? So I'm at users new. If I want to sign up, am I doing anything in terms of like the actual user in terms of like creating? No. So what I did was instead I made this own controller called sessions. So I have a sessions controller, I have a sessions view, and this is just it, right? It's just the login page. And so what I need is a custom route for this login page to go because I don't have a session model. So I can't use form for. So here I have form tag and I'm just putting in like a custom route. This custom route is very similar to what we talked about earlier this morning, and that is instead of like a patch to /carts, if I want to log in, I'm just going to make a post to /login. Because what I'm doing is creating a brand new session, so post makes sense as the HTTP verb, and then login just makes sense as a route, right? Like, hey, you want to log in? Great, here, route is login. I'm just going to use username and password again. So we can take a look at it. So if I were to go to in my sessions, boop, login. That was weird. My name is Jeff. All right, so we have like a login page, right? It's just a username and password. That's all it is. What this is going to do is I can put in a username like Tim. I can put in a password like password. This will post to /login. What controller action would you want to hit? Right, I want to create a brand new session here. So what controller action would make sense? Knowing I have a sessions controller. If I want to create a new session and I have a sessions controller, I would hit the sessions controller with an action of create. So, this one's a little dicey, but I'm going to walk you through it. I have create. The idea here is that I have params username and params password again. So I need some sort of method that can check, like I told you earlier, great, I have a username, I come in, I need to go into the database and find the user. Then I need to check that user has an attribute of password digest. And that's a hashified string. So I need to take @user.passwordDigest and compare it against the plain text password that came in, which is params at a key of password. So let's make that. It's a method called authenticate. And all it is on the user instance, right, @user.authenticate, I just want to pass it in the plain text password that I just got from params at a key of password. I'm going to do exactly what we did inside the terminal, and that is if the bcrypt password, right, I can do .new, then this right here, what it takes is the password digest, and I can compare it against a plain text password. So for example, okay, you saw that? I almost put crap. Okay, don't like poop jokes either. It's a tough crowd. So no sarcasm, no poop. All right, so we can do like password equals to bcrypt password dot create. We can put in poo. Okay, some people like it. Very good. Either way, if I take a look at pass, I have this bcrypt object. If I were to do bcrypt password dot new, which is a different operator, and I pass in the bcrypt object, then I can compare it to poo. And if I put poop, it'll be false. So the new doesn't work the way you think it does, but what you need to do is take in the bcrypt object, put it inside this new. If you do that, it'll convert the string into a bcrypt object.
Wouldn't it be the same if you just use pass equals poo? I thought we confirmed.
Yes, I can in fact use pass and compare it to poo. The problem is, what did I save with the database? Did I save a bcrypt object or did I save a string?
Oh, I see.
I saved the string. So I need to convert that string into a bcrypt object so I can use the bcrypt double equal. So I use the bcrypt.new to create an instance of bcrypt with this hashified string, giving me a bcrypt object, and then I can double equal it to poo. So what I want to do is, if in the new I pass in the string that I have in the database, and I can compare it to params at a key of password. If this is true, then the user is authenticated. They are who they say they are because their password matches the password that's in my database, even though the password they wrote as params at a key of password is plain text, and what I have in the database is this hashified string. And this is how I can use to compare them. So if you like all being upset, all of this is done for you by just simply doing. Well, but you need to understand why it's doing that. And this only works if inside whatever class you make, let's say you're making like a construction app and you have like plumbers who are users, right? So if you have class plumbers, whatever, then inside plumbers you must have the attribute password digest. This right here, this AutoMagic is looking for the attribute password digest, which is why we used it, and that's how that works, and it's doing all of this for you. It also adds a validation that said a user must be created with a password. So if I try to like make a username and no password, it'll kick it back. So it does all of this and a validation. bcrypt++.
I'm just confused why we need the bcrypt object. Like, couldn't you just hash plaintext and put in, compare that to the string, and have that be the object?
So what you're saying is, I can take this string, which is a string, and just go, hey, is that equal to the string poo?
No, couldn't you just hash poo and you get the same thing?
No, because remember, every time I run bcrypt create, it makes a different hashified string.
Okay.
And it makes a different bcrypt object with a different salt.
So then how are they doing that?
That's not for us young mortals to know.
What do you mean?
It's a one-way hashing algorithm, and if people knew how that worked, this wouldn't be secure.
Because they're doing exactly that, right? I mean, they're taking the plain text boost. They're saying, I've recently converted this into a hash with a salt. And though that should be a different outcome every time, I can
Yes.
go back into time and say, I once made this and it became this, and I know that it's equal.
Correct. It's a one-way transformation, and there's ways to check to see if they're strictly equal, but there's no way to reconvert. How they check is a very complicated algorithm, and if people understood and knew that, it would be correct.
So,
I think the problem is it's not.
They, as in like just hackers in general? Yes.
so the dot new is sort of like dot to is kind of thing. It's just like changing the class.
Remember, the create method is different. It's being overwritten. It's doing something different. And if you look, this initialize, it's doing some cool stuff. Cool? Is it a valid hash? Like, is this coming, like, is it the right number of strings and characters? And then it takes in some sort of attributes in every single one, and it'll do some cool stuff, right? Basically, it kind of like kind of creates it, makes a bcrypt object, so that when it compares against the string again, it should work. That's the idea behind it. You then.
The pass secure password thing, does it do any additional validations in terms of like password line?
No. Nope. It just needs to be there.
Or is it just literally
Like a presence true.
it just be like an and?
How do you, like, what's stopping the website from not doing this? Just like saving your password in plain text?
Nothing.
So we just kind of trust websites, or how do you know?
Yo, let me break something down for you. All right, here's a terrible secret. Yo, the internet is like broken. It's like completely hung by a thread, and the developers are absolutely in charge. It's very scary, scary. And once we get into JavaScript, you learn how to like manipulate things, and I give you the power, and I'm like Captain Planet, and I'm like, the power is yours. You're gonna be like, oh snap, and then you have to Spider-Man Uncle Bennett. You know what I mean? Good stuff.
Actually, someone
So interesting pop culture references with this class, yeah.
probably gotten in trouble because like they found like database of just like
Yeah.
password that
Yeah, you'll read it, right? Like there's a lot of news out there, like have I been pwned, and some other like hacker news you can read, and it'll just be like, hey, it turns out Delta was storing all your passwords as like plain text strings. You're like, but as developers, we're like, wow, that's sketch. But as a user, you're like, that sounds bad. It's probably bad, and then you just like feel bad, and then like fear mongering happens. But yes, everything you're doing is completely up to the developers of that website, and so it's up to you to really kind of trust them. So that's why if you see like a really sketchy blog and you want to create a new user, I would use a password I would have absolutely no association with. Like I'd like make a username like Tim, even though my name's Evans, and then my password would be like Snuffleupagus or something. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not having this related to me whatsoever. I just want to read this blog. So yeah, cool. All right. It has been 47 minutes. That is authentication in a nutshell. Normally I spell everything out for you and I kind of like go like dive a little bit deeper, but this class is actually very strong just based on your questions. So I was actually able to move pretty quick. Let's take a 5-minute break before we dive into authorization. Cool? All right, let's take a break. All right, so the first thing is we have this user, right, and we do this .findBy. There's a main difference between find and findBy. Does anyone kind of know what that is?
Find is by ID, find by is whatever you find.
Right, so I have like a user, okay? Yeah, let's do user.last, which I think is Tim, right? Cool. So we have user.last, so I have user, I can do user.find, right? I can, let's see, the last user is number 8, right? So if I were to find user 8, I just get user 8, no big deal, right? I can do user.findBy with an ID of 8, no big deal. They're the same. If I were to user.findBy 1 million, what would I get? Nil. If I do user.find with it's probably not a million, I'm using a lot of zeros. What would I get? That's right, error. So this will actually break your code. So it's important to know that I can simply do user.findBy. If the user.findBy does not find a user with the parameter key of username, it will return nil. If it does, I have a user object. So right now, user is either nil or a user object. What I can do is, what I want to do is, I want to do something along the lines of like if at user, right, is like not, is it this one? Yeah. If it's not nil, all right, then I want to also do if at user.authenticate and then check with the params at a key of the password that I just put in with the login. Right? Instead of doing this sort of nested thing, right, you can kind of, again, if it's nil, nil is falsy, I can do this. And if I don't want to nest these two if statements, then I can combine them and do if at user, and at user.authenticate. But the thing about this is it needs to be in this order because Ruby, like me, and developers in general, not you guys, are very lazy. So let's find out what happens. If I do true and true, what should I get? If I do true and false, what should I get?
False.
For sure. If I do true and, what is a variable I have not declared? Just name anything.
Fish.
Sure. Fish, right? What should I see?
No, wait. Does it exist?
Undeclared variable or method fish. Right? I think you guys are just guessing, which is great because you got the first couple right. So here's what happens, right? What if I do false and true? What should I get? Cool, right? If I do false and fish, what should I get?
False.
Absolutely not. You should be getting false.
Because false goes first.
So here's what. I'm like in the middle of about to explain. I mean, yeah. So Ruby's very lazy, right? If it sees this AND operator, it knows that both sides must evaluate to true for the statement to be true. If Ruby reads false and then hits and, it literally does not matter what's after this. It'll just be like, hey, the first half was false. I don't care what's afterwards because I know for a fact whatever this is will be false. We could take advantage of that by.
You do that other way?
No, we just. All right, this class is very good at participating, but let's hold it to like hand raising. Cool. So we take advantage of this by doing this and because remember the at user is either nil or an object. If it's nil, then this will evaluate to false and it will never run this code. And so that's the shorthand for this. And so instead of doing that,
It'll run into an error, right? If you do it the other way.
it will not run into an error because this evaluates to false and it never gets to this side.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you reverse it.
Correct. If I reversed it, then it would potentially run into the error. So to the point I'm trying to make, it must be in this order. Right? You had a question? Interesting class. Interesting class. But I will say, powerful class, right? Cool. Oh, we're gonna have fun. So I have a user, and I've authenticated, right? So remember that authenticate method is checking against the string, the bcrypt string, and then putting in that plain text password. If it does return true, they've authenticated, which was part 1 of this lecture. Now I can create this session, all right? They're there, they logged in, the password's correct, it's all good. So now I create this session, right? And then I redirect to user. Otherwise, if this breaks, I can just be like, yo dog, invalid username or password. So here is important because do I want to tell the user more information or less information about their username and password? Less information. I've literally seen like some user sites just be like, hey, you might have typed your password in wrong. Is your username Tim? I'm like, you don't want to tell people that kind of stuff. You just want to be like, yo dog, it was wrong. Something went wrong, I don't know what, but try again. Because like username and password are sensitive information.
When you do a redirect to just like a variable that will not like specify the path, does it just go to like that shape page?
If I do a redirect without specifying a path,
No, like right above that in the statement in the top part, you just redirect to add user. Is that just gonna?
oh, you guys haven't seen the shortcut? Oh my
I've
god.
seen it in labs, but like,
I'm sorry, what's the question? This, all right, if I just put the object, Rails has some auto magic. If I redirect to, I'm like in the middle of my sentence. But I love that you're in the same like thought path as me, which is correct. And that is, if I redirect just to the object, it will assume the show page. So yeah, cool. Is there, yeah?
But when they say there's no account, isn't that helpful? Isn't that a better user experience to know, like, oh, I mistyped something versus that account doesn't exist? Like, if you go on a website you've been using a long time, right?
Right. And so this is your choice, right? This is exactly your choice. You have the option.
Are you saying that if you give them more information, there's not a way to give them more information? Once they verify the username exists, then they're just messing up the password? Are you saying that that's a flaw in security in the first place?
Correct. What I'm trying to say is, if I say, hey, this user exists, but the password is wrong, right? You're giving a lot of information away. In the same way that if I went to, like, say, bookface.com, very popular social networking site, and then I put in the username like tim@gmail.com, should I get information like, hey, that account exists, but the password's wrong? Or should it just be like, hey, nice try, that the username and password are like, they're wrong. One of them is wrong, maybe both are wrong.
Facebook also has the algorithm that lets you search by email, so.
Okay. No, you're correct, but I'm just saying, like, you should be vague here.
In saying redirect to @user, is that relying on the existence of the user path helper method? Like, if I went in and went into custom route and said, hey, for
Yes.
my show method, have it be recognized as banana path, like, would that still work? Does that work on its own?
That is a very good question, and I would want to test that.
Okay.
So, all right, let's go back, right? So we're redirecting to the user, right? And now the session exists. The next kind of problem that we kind of run into is once I log in, for Tim, and I think it's like password. Bloop, no. I'm a dirtbag. Oh, a dirtbag. Embarrassing. Exot. Cool. Let's try logging in. Airborne. We have Tim, password, and I log in. Hey, right? Powerful. Look at this guy. So the idea here is that I'm like on this user show page. I can log out if I wanted to, and I can even delete this account. Cool. So what about what I'm doing right now is tracking who the user is? It's supposed to be in session, right? So let's think this through. I need to be able to track who's currently logged in. So let's go into session. Let's go into application controller. I have all these methods built, right? For a current user, logged in, and authorized. Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. I think that's all I need to get rid of. Cool. Let's try it. Get to slash. This is important to note that each request takes an unspecified amount of time. Like, I have no idea when it'll come back, and that'll be good later on in mod 3. Skip before action and users controller. Cool. So there's a lot of the things that you can use, and we'll talk about it. Bloop. In terms of like before action, skip before action, after action, it's powerful. Cool. So should be good. Just kidding. All right. I'm in the user show page. This is how I'm looking at the error, right? I'm in the user show page. Somewhere in the show page, there's this code. Cool. So I'm in the user's show page. Bloop. Somewhere I'm using this code. So I'm gonna yeet it out of here. Yeet. Yeet. Is this cool lingo for you guys or no? Don't use that? All right. It's all right. So the idea here, oh man, I left those in there. It's okay. So the point is, like, I'm logged in right now. I can just go yeet on over to user 6 and see, oh, Billy boy. But I'm logged in as user 8. I'm logged in as Tim. Why should I be able to delete Tim's account? I mean, Billy boy's account as logged in as Tim. Is that a good user experience? For Tim, but probably not for Billy boy, right? And the idea here is that, like, right now in my app, look at Michael over here. There's no way for me to track who is currently logged in, and you can kind of just like play with the URL and just dance around your application. If you know anything about RESTful routing, you can kind of just go anywhere in the app. Now that you're logged in, there is a session for you. So if I wanted to go back to the home page, right? If I wanted to make a button here that says take me home, take me to my account, what code would I put in there? I'd have to do something like there's a button and it goes to users slash what? At user ID? It would have to be the session at a key of user ID because that's the person that's logged in. So the session at a key of user ID is the person that's currently logged in, right? Whoever owns the session at key of user ID is who's logged in because that's where it's assigned. Right as they get authenticated, session at key of user ID is in fact that person's user ID. I can use this to my advantage by simply doing, there's a current user. I need to know who it is. So I can do user.findBy, and that is the ID using session at key of user ID. Are there any questions as to like how this method works?
Why did you need the brackets in there?
Okay, you don't. I show a lot of different things in here because people forget how much Ruby does for you syntactically. There's a lot of syntactical sugar. So like I know that there's a key value pair, but for whatever reason I don't have to pass it in as a hash. So I start to like sprinkle little things like this in there because JavaScript is very unforgiving. If you do something like this, it'll just be like, I don't understand. You're just giving me ID symbol session user ID. And then you're like, come on, dog. You know I mean hash. And just be like, I didn't. JavaScript's a jerk. Powerful, kind of a jerk. Ruby's all like, oh yeah, no, I know what you mean. No big deal, MBD. It's cool. And so I sprinkle little things like this in. So I'm glad you kind of caught that. Cool? All right, the next thing is, right, so great, we have a current user. The other thing that's pretty important is figuring out whether or not somebody is actually logged in, right? Because right now your application, if I log out, you can't really track whether or not there's somebody that's logged in. Nowhere in our code is it like, hey, is there a session with a key of user ID? And so here we have a method that is it logged in? And we have this thing called like the double bang operator, right? Like bang bang. And let me explain what this means, unless someone else would love to explain it. Your class just loves to explain things, so I just figured I'd give you all the opportunity.
Yeah.
Makes true into true and false into false.
No, the other way.
All right.
Basically, current
All
user
right,
is
look-
gonna come back as an object, and like you put one bag to like return a boolean, but that gives you the incorrect boolean because it's gonna give you false as opposed to true. So then you set the other bag to return it back to the correct boolean.
That's correct. So what the double bang operator is,
That's
what the double bang operator is it allows you to coerce any value into its Boolean equivalent. For example, right? We know that a string like your boy is truthy. If I exclamation mark your boy, nobody caught that very good, smooth. What would I get? Cool. What is the opposite of false? What?
Irish true.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. So the idea here is that I can take any value and coerce it to its Boolean equivalent. So for example, nil we know is true or false. So what is the opposite of nil? True. If I bang bang nil, I will get false because we know nil is falsy. So I can take any value and coerce it into its Boolean equivalent. Cool? Is that like a clean explanation of it? Yeah?
You use that specifically when you want to return a boolean? Because
Yes.
that would be useful otherwise, right?
Correct. This is exactly used for that purpose, and that is to return a Boolean. If I know a value, I can coerce it to its Boolean equivalent. Yes?
Is that acting as an operator on its own, or operator on its own, or is that a bang acting on another bang?
There's a bang acting on another bang. Cool. So If there is a current user, right, that means that there is a session that a key of user ID exists. So current user exists, right? Then bang bang current user would be what? True. Because the object itself is truthy. If, however, we did a find by and there was nothing at a session, a key of user ID, remember find by returns what if it doesn't find it? So therefore, bang bang nil will return what? So if there's no session at a key of user ID, then logged in will either return true or false based on whether or not there is a current user. Somebody actually is logged in. Question?
So when a user logs in, their user ID is shuffled into the session at user ID key. But when, like, what clears the session at user ID so that it doesn't think they're always logged in?
What clears the session at a key of user ID so they don't think that they're always logged in? You can set sessions for cookies to expire after a certain point that we talked about earlier in the mod, or you can log out. And simply knowing what we know, in order to log out, what would we have to do? You'd have to blast the session at a key of user ID. You do not want to blast session, because if we remember, we looked at it, there was a lot in there, right? You don't want to blast that. Bad things happen. But look what happened in destroy. You could just do session.delete the key of user ID, or you can just go session at a key of user ID is nil. That is like the log out feature. And so knowing what we know about Rails, I see your question, right? All we have to do is hit this controller action. That would log us out. So how do we hit the controller action? You drop a button, you drop a link, and all it does is have to hit this controller action. So you probably make some sort of route, like, I don't know, get to /logout, hits the sessions controller at an action of destroy. That would log them out. Right? And then flash notice like you logged out. Lols. Do you remember this? This was popular for a little bit. I didn't use it until it was weird. Question?
I remember we were talking a lot about delete versus destroy. And so when you're deleting a session, you want to always use delete because that's just going to delete the actual like session, the idea that you pushed in for that session, whereas like we'll destroy make a difference because you don't want to destroy the user ID. Is that a distinction that's important here?
No, not really. So a little clarity on just routes. You can use any route to do anything you want. The HTTP verbs are sort of code amongst developers to talk to other developers about what this is supposed to do. In theory, every single request I make can be a GET request. Every single one. Like everything I make. I want to make a new user, I can make a get to /users/new/make this person. And then in my routes, if I had that obnoxious get request, I would just point it to user create. Right? So the idea here is I can either do a post, a patch, or a delete, but what makes the most sense when I'm trying to log out and I'm trying to clear out a particular session? Then I would use the delete route. So when I make the link to or the button to, I would put method delete. So I can specify this one. The reason we use HTTP verbs also, this is finicky at best. Cool. Is I can do the same exact route, but because I use a different HTTP verb, I can point it to different controller actions.
Sorry, I think I was more like we meant the delete versus destroy in terms of an active record action.
Okay.
That wouldn't make sense.
So active record, you're talking about like the destroy.
Yeah, like just delete session ID versus you delete session ID dot whatever.
I use delete.
But destroy doesn't make any difference because I remember we came across like when we were
Talking about destroy.
doesn't matter. I'm
I don't think that active record has a destroy method on it.
There is.
There is?
Yep.
I'm sorry, not active record. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's not that. I'm sorry. What I meant to say was session is something that Rails builds,
Oh.
and there is a delete method on it. I don't think there's a destroy method on the session hash. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for that clarification. A lot of things happening. Cool. All right. Noise. So what I want to talk about now. So any questions rather on like this how logout works? All right, no big deal. Let's go back to user. Oops, just kidding. Application controller, right? So I can track who the current user is and who is currently logged in. So again, we talked all about authentication. Are you who you say you are? And now we need to talk a little bit more about like, all right, you are who you say you are, but what are you allowed to do? What are you authorized to see? And so for me, this again is just a basic example. You can very easily scale this. Now the idea here is I have a method called authorized. It will redirect you to the login path unless you're logged in, right? This allows me to lock down the entire application because why should you see anyone's user page if you don't have an account and you're not logged in? Some websites allow you to look at certain things, right, if you're not logged in, and that's okay. But here, what I'm trying to say is if you're not logged in and you don't have an account, you can't do nothing. You're not allowed to do anything if you're not logged in. Cool? Oh, wow. Okay. Straightforward. Straight shooter class. Got it. So what I can do is I need to invoke this method everywhere in my application. That way, any route they hit, any controller they hit, immediately redirects them to log in unless they're logged in, right? So if I want to see a show page or I want to see the shopping cart, I want to see an index, it's going to first check to see, hey, are you logged in? If not, yo, dog, log in, please. And so the way I could do that is I can call a before action. In the same way I do a before action, I do the find params, like user params or whatever. Then if I do before action, look at where I'm doing it though. Application controller. I'm doing this before action authorized. That means that anything that inherits from application controller will in fact, before any action, be calling authorized. So this essentially locks down the whole app. Like you can't do anything unless you're logged in. But there's kind of a problem with that. And that is, what if I'm trying to log in? What will it do? If I'm trying to hit the login page, where will it send me? To the login page. Once I sign in, I hit the sign in button, what's it gonna do? Send me to the login page. I'm gonna hit sign up, and what's it gonna do? Send me to the login page, which is not a good user experience, right? 1 star. So this before action can be skipped. So where should we skip it? Probably when the user wants to actually create an account. All right? First, they actually have to see the sign up page, and then they have to actually hit the route to sign up. So I need to skip the before action of authorized only on the new and the create. This will allow a user to do the new and the create action. Yeah?
Is there a way to do that in the original before action with an accept? Is there an accept? Like before action authorized accept?
What you're saying is you want me to put accept here.
Yeah, is that real?
Accept is a real thing. However, if I call accept here, I will be calling accept on the new on what? The new in the application controller. Is there a new in the application controller? It will also accept any new in any controller. So while what you're saying is true, it is not the best to put it here.
Don't you have to also skip the login in the session?
Yes. And so let's let's use our hands here. But you're correct. So I also want to skip before action the authorized only on the new and the create, so that they can log in as well. Otherwise, I get stuck in that weird loop. Yeah.
So login is also a post request to creating a session.
Yep.
A sign up is a post request to creating a new
Yep.
session.
Yep. That is exactly correct.
Can we see, where is that happening? Sign up and then session, sign in.
Cool. You want to take a look at the sign up, right?
Yeah.
So first I need to log out so we can kind of go through the whole experience start to finish. But the server's not up. Almost got me. Almost got me. Cool. Let me hit log out. Bloop. Okay. Skip. Embarrassing. All right. I need to also skip before action on log out. I probably need to do that. So I don't want to have to be logged in to log out, right? What?
Wait, why?
I would, you're right, but it shouldn't redirect me to login. I didn't finish the sentence.
Why not? In case I want to go back in.
Yes, what you're saying is true, but it won't actually let me log out. It'll redirect me to login. I won't be able to log out. Yeah. So I need to be logged in to log out, but because what authorized does is it stops any action and it prevents me from even logging out, and it'll redirect me to login, which we both know is like, come on now. I'm trying to log out. You're asking me to log in. Embarrassing. Cool.
Wait, in that case, you'd be sent to the login page with a session with the user still in it,
Mm-hmm.
which is like,
Hmm?
Yeah, I
Quick
don't.
question. I think
Authorized
your
is not
error
defined?
that
Oh.
you commented out the authorized and not that you
You're right.
destroyed.
All right, you ready? So you want to see the whole process, right? If I were to submit in users new, what controller action does this hit? Create in what controller? Right. So I create the user, right? With the user params, as we discussed in mod 1, it intercepts the password, overwrites the password digest column, and I save a hashified string into my database. So now the user is created. I will have user 9. And then it creates this session at a key of user ID is the brand new user I made. So that person is also simultaneously now logged in. Because in application controller, is there a current user? Say again? Right, as soon as I sign up, there will be a current user, right? And then it redirects to user, right? Which will now hit what page? Show. So I'm on the show page, right? And I'm at user.find. So let's take a look at the show page. Cool. I have a log out button. I mean, you remember mod 1, right? Right, we don't talk about Fight Club, right? So cool. So the idea here is what I can do is I have a username, right? I have like the Guy Fieri avatar by default. If the current user, right? Actually, I don't even need these IDs. I went hard in the paint for no reason. If the current user, whoever's currently logged in, session at a key of user ID. So let's say I made a brand new user, right? That's user ID number 9. And I go to the show page of user 3. This would mean that current user is what ID? 9. But when I went to the show page of user 3, who's the user? 3. So if the current user matches whoever the user is, then I want to delete this account. This is the conditional rendering part. And so it will only show the delete button if me as the current user is looking at my own show page. If I go to anyone else's show page, I should not be able to delete their account. And so let's do that, right? Let's sign up. Charles Entertainment Cheese. Cool. Fun. Embarrassing. Oh yeah, I made an extra one. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Embarrassing. Do do do. Do do do. Cool. So now I'm at. Oh right. Okay, cool. So I don't have access to this method called current user. Let's take a look. Current user is a helper method coming from what controller? Cool. Remember, I've never actually ever used a method inside the view. If I want to have a method available inside a view, I have to write helper method. It's very helpful. So user 9, I can log out and I see the delete this account. If I'm just trolling around, it's like, yo, why don't you take a look at your friends page? And I go to user 3. I will see Michael, but no delete button.
Why do you still have that? That's still logging you out of your.
We're logging out the current user.
Yeah,
Just a
whatever
place
you-
where it's
Right, I should be able to log out from anywhere though, right?
on our website, it'd be at the top right.
Yeah. So let's think about it, right? I'm at the show page, right? And the last thing I want to talk about before I let you all go is I have this button to log out. If I wanted this on every single page that existed, is there a particular view that has access to every single view page? So here, this is where I would probably put like my nav bar, and then I'd put like a login button, and then it's just Ruby, right? If current user exists, if the current user exists, oops, bloop, then I want to display maybe a button to or something like that, like log out. And then you can add even more logic, right? And it could be something like boop, boop, boop. Maybe not end, you can get even fancier, and then do the powerful else statement. So this will be like home page, right? So you have like a button to like the home page, and then you can finish like the rest of the route, right? I'm running out of time. And then otherwise, if there is no current user, you can do a button to go log in, and then you can put the login path. And so this is more conditional rendering. Are there any questions on conditional rendering, the current user, being logged in, sessions, locking down your application? Yeah, and then I see this one.
Can we just once again look at the helper method for current user?
For sure. Oops. Oops. It got me good, man. That fuzzy search was not helpful. Remember, this will only be here if I'm logged in. So I can hit the login route, and it creates a session. I can log out, it deletes that session key, or I can sign up, which both creates the user and creates the session, the key of user ID. I'm gonna reveal my vote. You good? Okay. I'm sorry. It's like you guys are like dark to me, so if you like just give me like a quick nod, I can't actually see it. So I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So you have to be a little bit more like, or whatever. Yeah. I answered her question. At least I thought I did. Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. Any other questions? Powerful.
Should these be like private methods, or like I don't know, like I feel like you're calling it the view, and it's like so easy, but these are like kind of like important things. Like all you're doing is writing current user or like logged in questions.
Yep.
In like your HTML thing, like
Yep.
view, and that's like I don't
Yes. So the idea here, right, is like, oh, hey, you know, the model shouldn't be like interacting with the database. This right here is not necessarily. It is making a query, but this one's pretty okay. If you have the right validations, right, client side and server side, this one's totally fine. Because there's no real other way to kind of find out whether or not you are who you say you are and you're authorized. You have to check to see if that user is there. Also, I'm not doing like user.findBy directly in the view. When I invoke this method, it actually goes through the controller, makes the query, and then returns it. As opposed to like in the show, doing literally right here, user.findBy. That make sense?